Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Rob Lyttle from Zerto. We are an HPE company specializing in disaster recovery, and I'm here today to talk to you guys about ransomware resiliency, real-time detection, and how to recover in the face of any disaster. But let's be fair, these days, the main disaster we all look at is around ransomware, right? That is the disaster in waiting. Zerto, as a software solution, is built from the ground up, and in the past 15 years, we've focused very much on disaster recovery. And our core goal is to ensure that key applications are recovered in minutes with seconds of data loss. We can do this across multiple sites, from a single license to the hyperscalers and back onto premise. And everything that we do, be it migrations, replications, restorations, or testing, is done so with zero impact on production. So a very elegant solution that ultimately, from our perspective, saves people's jobs. Because if you have a tier 0, tier 1 application, if that goes down for any period of time, it can end up in the press, and ultimately heads tend to roll with those types of headlines. So look, at the minute, cybercrime is growing massively. We're seeing a cyber attack every 2 seconds. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see this grow to be a multi-billion level industry. We are even seeing the productization of ransomware. People are now able to go onto the dark web and get ransomware as a service. In a subscription world, I find this to be absolutely bonkers, that we can now go and actually get malicious software from bad actors as a service. And really where we get to in all this is a tragic number of a third, right? 1/3 of people have been attacked. 1/3 of enterprises are being attacked weekly. And at least 1/3 of organizations have paid one ransom. And the sad situation is, like, if your house is burgled and it's easy to get into, that burglar will wait a month. You'll put your new TV in, you'll have everything new, and they'll break in again. Because if we don't make it difficult and don't have the ability to restore services in the instance of ransomware attacks, they will continue. So we need to find ways in which we can make this more difficult and have a clear recovery path. I've spoken to a lot of people today who have focused very much on the prevention, the penetration testing, these types of things to make sure that we're secure. But what I don't see a lot of is the restoration of the services should they be corrupted. So we want to prevent people getting into our house, and that's great. Absolutely agree with that approach. But what we're trying to say here is it's kind of a case of when this might happen, not if. We can all do that prevention as much, but I think I'll go on to say, but if we find a problem, it can take an attacker, I think, 8 days to get into your system, and it can take us 38 days to find the patch. So we're seeing increasing sophistication, the productization of these types of things. We're seeing state actors get involved. You know, the depth of attacks and multi-layered attacks coming. This innovation is staggering to me when I begin to look into this, and finding ways not just to prevent it, but to ensure that the resolution of services can absolutely take place. I think this is in the last year, 79% of people have triggered a disaster recovery response, and 61% of that has been related to ransomware. On average, it's taking us 21 days to recover. And we have to define what recovery is, because that could be the resolution of services, but are we even getting our data back when we pay the ransom? And it's really just the tip of the iceberg. I love a good iceberg slide, I'm sorry, but at the top, I don't want to focus necessarily on what the dollar amount is. Everybody in this room will have a different dollar amount in mind. I think it's actually the loss of services. That 21 days ultimately kills revenue, and then it kills trust with your customers. And ultimately, that trust and reputational damage is actually where I tend to focus, because these dollar figures can be thrown out in the wind, but if you're in finance, if you're in government, if you're in healthcare, that lack of or loss of trust is really where the damage takes place. And it takes 7 good experiences to overcome 1 bad. And if you're going to lose that trust, the reputational damage for me ultimately is where this becomes a serious problem, never mind the data loss. So in terms of recovery, just because you pay a ransom, only 4% of people are actually getting the full data that was encrypted back. And that's because when they say in the decryptor keys, this is actually very buggy, right? So the data can actually be corrupted when you're debugging it. So in that instance, only 4% of people are actually paying the ransom and getting everything back that was encrypted. Everything's different. There is no one way to protect. Ransomware recovery is essentially an onion. There has to be multi-layers. I spoke previously, there's a prevention, there's how we stop them getting in. We also need to focus very much on how we restore the services, because the disruption and downtime after each attack is really, there's 2 in Scotland I know in the last month that have faced this, and both of them are having very difficult conversations with their customers because they're having to say, look, we've been breached, data's been taken, and look, we need to find a way to resolve this and save face. Finally, we're also seeing no geographical boundaries. We're seeing multinationals being hit in multiple countries at the same time, using multiple different approaches depending on the countries in which they're operating. This could be across Europe, the US, even at the Africa and Asia, all at the same time. Each of these different offices are doing different things to try and prevent ransomware. And one thing that they're not doing, they're all focusing on the prevention and not the restoration. So from a data protection perspective, Zerto is not going to prevent. It is not going to solve all your ills, but the way in which the Zerto platform works, we essentially seed between 2 sites. Once we are seeded, we take 5 to 10 second journal markers and we put those markers into an encrypted folder. So we have no backups to encrypt. We have a very small surface area that is totally encrypted. And essentially, if there's a ransomware attack that maybe was at midday, we're taking you back to 11:59 and 55 seconds, relaunching your systems into a sandbox and allowing you guys to use some of the forensic tools to root out the ransomware prior to it ever being executed. So we have a very elegant solution that could give you hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands recovery points over a 30-day period. And we are the only person in the market now that can have a continuous data protection across a journal, markers every 5 seconds for that 30-day period. We also do this as an application-centric approach. So not only would we do single files, single VMs, but we will also consistently group applications as a single entity, take the markers against the entirety of the application, and that application could have a front end in Azure, it could have the back end on premise, and essentially we would create what we call a virtual protection group around this application. That would then, on the web, app dev, file server, database server, they would be one logical unit. They would have one journal marker. So when we're restoring services, we are taking you back prior to the attack and restoring the entire application at one time. This is done with 5 to 10 seconds of data loss, and we're restoring a system in as little as 3 minutes. So data is ultimately the reason, why ransomware exists. Our data is now valuable. I have a slide elsewhere that mentions that some US airlines, their loyalty schemes are valued at $20 billion. What is the value of the data within your business, and what do we need to start doing to protect it? Everybody is talking about the move to being a data-driven business, data-driven decision-making. How are we taking steps to protect that data? And ultimately, as I said, if only 4% of people are getting the full amount of data back, some data cannot be replaced. If you're in healthcare, customer outcomes are life and death. If you're in finance, there's regulators and compliance officers that ultimately will nail you to the wall if we are not ensuring that that data is recoverable. I speak to people all the time about disaster recovery. We've got a great disaster recovery plan. I ask them, when was the last time you tested, and feet start to shuffle, and so testing is really the crux of it, because if you've got a disaster recovery solution that's never been tested, you actually don't have a solution, you've got a wish, right? And I don't want my job to be dependent on a wish. So there's a number of reasons why people don't do it. At the end of the day, we all get asked to do more with less budget. We want to increase things 30-40%, but the IT budget does not match the CEO's intent, right? And we have to find ways to do this. And again, we see people taking anywhere every 3 months, 6 months, taking 3.5 to 4 days to do testing. What I tell people is, on a Saturday morning, you could lie in your bed, and from a mobile phone app, we could run a test against a single VM and application and give you a 3 to 5 page report that will give you the recovery times, the data loss. It will show the steps related to the DR test, and that can be shared with CISOs, risk officers, compliance regulators, and we're yet to see somebody who hasn't accepted that test. While we're doing that test, again, there is no impact on production. All of this is very elegant, very easy for people to do, and repeatable. We also need to challenge the existing thinking, right? We have all lent on the 3-2-1, right, for a long time. Why not 4-2-1? Why not, four sites, 3 copies, 2 versions, 1 immutable? There's different ways now in which we can challenge the existing thinking. And how do we diversify? How do we become a harder target for people to hit? And I've been very impressed by the discussions I've had today about that front end. And again, I keep mentioning, how do we at the back end ensure that the systems can be recovered if and when there is penetration? We have to make sure we cover the whole estate. So at Zerto, we are also on the verge of releasing this into containers. So we're seeing containerization becoming more and more prevalent to get scale on applications and repeatability. How are we going to begin looking at recovering containers should they be compromised? What about your SaaS estate, right? We've all got Office 365, we've all got Salesforce, we've all got a number of SaaS products. Is anybody backing them up, right? That data, it could be customer data. Regulators could be coming, asking you guys, again, how are you managing that customer data? Where does that live? And if you don't even have, say, we're evaluating it, then people ask questions. But really, we need to look at how to do that. Zerto has a very complete solution around the SaaS environment as well. So if ransomware comes in through user mistakes and bad user behavior, we can also roll back around some of the malware that may come onto that estate as well. And everything we do is hardware agnostic. So we're a software-only solution. We don't care about the hypervisor. We don't care about the hardware. We don't care about the storage. We work at the hypervisor level to control the virtual machines, and actually at the disk level and host level within virtual platforms. So we can replicate across from a Dell storage to HP storage to IBM storage from a single license. We are simply lifting the disk. We are in a virtual environment. We don't care about volumes and LUNs. We don't care about the stuff that is already in place. We simply replicate the data at that disk level. And it means that we can move this data between a virtual environment on premise to cloud, back again, and all without any disruption on your production environment. We are building applications now. As I said, you could have the front end on a hyperscaler, you could have the back end on premise. You could have multiple data sources linking into this. We could have APIs related to it. Modern apps are being distributed more and more across various locations. Again, we need to make sure that from a framework perspective of how we launch, manage, and maintain applications, that we ultimately have a plan that should something happen, we can recover those applications into a modern state. So being application-centric and ensuring those applications have a plan for us is central to everything we do. This is what I mentioned earlier. So it takes 12 days for a bad actor to exploit what you have within your infrastructure. If we notice that, it could take us 30 days to patch it. So this is essentially us chasing our tails at all points. Right now, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't have an attack surface that could be exploited right now. We just don't know where it is. So again, back to that point, whether it is a traditional disaster, whether it is a bad actor, whether it is malware, we need to make sure that we have the ability for sandboxes to test and ensure that we are covering our backside. We have to make sure that when patches come out, that we have a rollback plan. I'm sure we've all felt the pain from Microsoft at some point, where I think it's Patch Tuesday comes out and everything breaks, and then we're all struggling and nobody's happy. Upgrade testing, forensic processes, scanning. So the new, I'll leave that for a second. So what is the criteria? We worked with a couple of clients to come up with what they really want to see in terms of building resiliency for ransomware. And ultimately it comes down to covering everything, no downtime or data loss, covering that diversified and distributed application and infrastructure we now have, and I think aiding the security posture that within our security tool set, we need multiple tools to ensure that whatever happens, we get back up and running. Oh, sugar. So I think we need to begin challenging the existing thinking. Do you know, we speak to people who go, we've got a 4-hour SLA. Well, with Zerto, that could be under an hour. We could probably restore most of your systems. We'd be very confident to do that in an hour. Why is it the SLA 4 hours? Does something like your internet need to be 4 hours? Do you know, can it be 8 hours? We need to make sure that the tools are fit for purpose, and we're actually setting SLAs based on the value of the application and the data. Most of the time, we see recovery being ignored, right? We see people wanting to prevent. We see people looking at potentially backups or snapshots or some other tool to recover. But more and more you see ransomware is going straight for these snapshots and backups and encrypting them first. Have a plan, right? And test, right? I've mentioned that, so I'll not go into it too much. And then, you know, why Zerto? So multiple sites, application focused, be it a VM, a single file, single folder. We offer data loss of seconds, restoration in minutes. We can orchestrate, automate, and provide analytics around this. So we can automate failover, we can automate failback. We have 3-click restoration to thousands of recovery points marked every 5 seconds. The testing and reporting can be done in minutes. It's non-disruptive. We are not here to keep people in the office to do key testing. We want this testing to be simple, and then monitor your applications, get your RPOs, RTOs, your recovery points and times, all within a very simple GUI. It's a very, very elegant solution. And then, yeah, I've been over most of this, and this is the key points: resolution in seconds. And de-risking everything with the core testing. So Zerto, look, I've been over this, but it's continuous data protection in a 30-day journal. Using the journaling technology, we take 5 to 10 second markers. Each of those 5 to 10 second markers can be on a VM or an application, giving you guys thousands of recovery points. There is no agents, there is no snapshots, there is no additional subscriptions. We simply have a VM license, however many VMs that you have. We don't care if that VM has 10 terabytes or 10 gigabits, right? It's the same for each VM. Everything's encrypted, one-to-many, and essentially we offer a Linux hardened application that holds all of this data. Deep interoperability and offsite immutability are all built into the product. So just a quick overview of one of our customers. This is a US customer who basically had a backup solution. They had a ransomware attack and were out of action for 2 weeks with quite a lot of data loss. Then once they implemented Zerto after this attack, as I mentioned, the burglar tried to come back, and these guys were back up and running in minutes with virtually no data loss. And I think it's quite a good quote there. We've all had that sinking feeling that something's gone wrong, and being able to get back up and running helped these guys. So in the last week, we have actually released a new version of Zerto. This new version does everything on the previous version, but now does real-time detection. By real-time detection, we are actively monitoring for abnormalities within data sets and VMs, and we will proactively alert people if we believe encryption is taking place. In addition, we are now working with the wider HPE team to create an actual appliance that is also air-gapped. So if you're in the large enterprise space, we now have a complete appliance that takes this off any systems and allows you guys to recover the unrecoverable, as the marketing people will tell you. This is fairly new. It was announced last week. I'm not sure you guys can attend, but last week we launched this. So it's fairly new. It's not a point upgrade. It's a new version for us, but pretty much the same rules apply. We want it to be simple. In terms of deployment, our deployment is almost like a Office 365 deployment. We're assigning a VM a license, right? And we would do a 12-week assisted installation where, okay, the license is assigned, but ultimately we need to make sure that you're replicating correctly, you're creating the VPGs, and we do that over time to ensure that everything is in place. And really, that's it from me. I don't want to talk at you anymore. We like to have our technology challenged. So we have survival guides, we have videos, but we also have hands-on labs. If you go to zerto.com/labs, you can download the Zerto software, you can test it yourself. Should you have an interest, we're happy to do demos. If you're moving towards a project, we're happy to go up against anybody in a proof of concept. We want you guys to be comfortable with our solution. And, that's just the final slide. Continuous protection for any app, any cloud, any threat, disaster, mobility, whatever that may be. Zerto offers software only, no impact, reporting, all built in. There is nothing additional that you need to pay for. It is simply how many VMs do you have. I would say, look, we're built for disaster recovery, and not all apps or VMs need full disaster recovery. I go back to that SLA. We usually cover around 25 to 35% of production VMs that can't have that data loss. But if something can have a 4-hour SLA, maybe use snapshotting, maybe use backups, right? It depends on the value of that application. But if you cannot afford data loss and you need to be restored in minutes, we're very happy to have a conversation with you guys moving forward that Zerto can do that pretty easily. So look, that's it for me. I think I've got a bit of time left. My friend at the back here has a microphone if anybody has any questions or clarifications needed. I don't want to stand in the way of lunch. Anything? We'll close it down then. Oh, sorry, yes?
Thank you. So one question. What about if your domain is compromised and your DCs are down? How do you log into Zerto to get?
Well, that's a great question. But because Zerto is kept in an encrypted Linux file, this is usually available outside of those methodologies. So we sit we can't be encrypted because we're already encrypted. We can sit in an S3 bucket, right? We are essentially active passive. So essentially we go in, access through the Zerto GUI, and are then using the markers that we've made in the journal to rebuild systems on the fly. So we are not sitting with any attack area that needs to go. We would actually rebuild the domain within the Zerto restoration. Right, so we'd be happy to talk about that because most people at this stage say this is too good to be true, right? So we're happy to get a solution architect to speak to you guys and actually show this in action. We could set up that very scenario and do a demo for you and show, look, this is how this would actually take place.
I suppose in a similar fashion, you're talking about air gap there. That's the sort of thing you would need as well. If your domain is down, you want that air gap to make sure that
Absolutely. It does depend on the use case. So the appliance that we're bringing out sits very comfortably in the enterprise space, right? It's not a cheap appliance, so there needs to be good use cases and business cases for that. But that is why we're going towards that type of air gapping. And this is actually one of the first things we've built with HPE technology. It's got Aruba technology in there and Zerto. So it's using the full product suite for the first time to build something quite interesting. But yes, we see a move towards that air gapping in more complex environments. Thanks for the great question. Oh, one at the back here.
Do you have any that's working with operational technology at all?
By operational technology, you mean?
Control systems, SCADA?
I would need to double check. I'm still relatively wet behind the ears at Zerto, so I've been here for 4 months. So if we can maybe talk after, I can get you some answers on that. I don't want to tell you half a truth or a truth and a half. Anything else, or are you all happy to break for lunch? Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for your attention. And look, I'm here and my colleague Declan is here. If you want to have a chat or anything, please reach out and it would be lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much.